If you enjoyed R&B in the 90s, you must have fallen in love with the angelic voice that opened one of the biggest songs of the 90s. That was Jace of the tragic group Soul for Real. Four teenagers suddenly found themselves with the fame they always desired after their song Candy Rain hit the airwaves and was wildly received. Their song was played at every party and in every home, and they topped the billboards for several weeks. And with the fame came loads of money. Finally, they left the streets and found themselves in places they had only previously dreamt about. But their escape from the hustle of the streets was short-lived. Just as swiftly as they left, they returned. Blackballed, accused of fraud, scorned by several producers, locked up by the feds. Their fall from glory was quite tragic and even heartbreaking, and it left them struggling to find their feet for over 25 years. But what could have happened? And how did they come into the limelight anyway in an industry choked with distinct talents? One thing a lot of people do not know about this young group is that they are blood brothers. Chalk, born on the 30th of April, 1971, is actually Christopher Sherman Dalrymple. He brought his younger brothers together, Andre Lamont Dalrymple, or KD, Brian Bree Augustus Dalrymple, and Jason, or Jace, Oliver Dalrymple, and they began to sing at small streets, lobbies, and any shows that would have them. They were born in Wyandanch, New York, to a bishop father and a reverend mother, and they seem to have had a pretty normal childhood regardless. You can already tell, though, that their voices were harnessed in the church, and they sang in the choir, even as little kids. As teenagers, however, they found themselves in the streets. They were broke most of the time, so they had to find some means to survive. Brian, for example, got a job at McDonald's as a waiter and often worked hard to make ends meet. Even with their various jobs, they still found time to sing often in small clubs, but they were getting absolutely nowhere. Something special happened one night that kept their hopes alive, and it happened in the McDonald's restaurant Bree worked in. Bree was hard at work, washing the dishes and singing. To distract himself as usual, he must have been quite loud because his manager heard him. Not only was his manager, Dave Turner, impressed, but he also walked up to him and told him he sounded amazing. Bree was surprised, but he immediately told him about his brothers and their little group. He even implied he would be more impressed if he heard his siblings' voices. But even that wasn't enough to help them break into the industry, and they did everything. They even visited different labels and stood under the sun, trying to get an audience, but they were rejected every time.
We were running around to the different labels, and we'd be standing outside singing. We never really got the opportunity to, just the normal way of going about getting a deal, because everybody just was like, nah.
Everything changed one night. While trying to sing in a cramped lobby, someone who would change their life heard them. She was Robin, and she was dating the brother of the man who would be intertwined in their story forever. It was an ill-fated meeting, but they would not know until so much later. On this night, though, Robin walked up to the surprised teens, impressed. She told them that they had to sing for a talent show on Mount Vernon Day, set up to push local talents. Of course, they agreed, and that night, they found themselves walking into a large home with pretty pictures and music plagues on the walls. They were still in awe when a man walked in and asked them to sing for him. They did, and he practically jived along with them. He was also so spellbound by their voices, he immediately took them down to the basement, where they met the shock of their lives. They were in Heavy D's home, and they had just sung to his brother. Heavy encouraged them to sing for him too, and that was how their destiny changed. Of course, Heavy loved their voices. He loved them so much that he helped them pick a name. He and his boys worked hard to come up with a name that was both catchy and descriptive. One of his boys mentioned that the boys had souls. Another joked that they were also some real ass niggas. And just like that, Heavy blurred out, "This nigga's got soul for real." They all repeated the tag until they realized how good it was. Soul for real. Heavy's love also pushed him to promise to sign them. But according to Bree, While speaking to The Breakfast Club, Heavy took his time. The boys were itching to pop into the industry, but they remained calm, and it seemed their calmness paid off. Heavy introduced them to another top producer, Andre, who loved them as well. In fact, he wanted them on his label so badly that he made a deal with Heavy. He told Heavy that if he was able to match the proposition he made to the brothers, he had to let them come with them. Well, that is what happened. Even Diddy met them and loved them. They spoke to Diddy, and he wanted to sign them too, but he ended up signing 112, and they seem to have fared better than Soul For Real did. But back to the story. Andre produced their very first project, Candy Rain, and it was a massive hit. They didn't even expect it to do that well. When asked, Bree said he liked the song, but there were other songs that they had produced that they loved more and expected to do much better. The label had asked them which song they least wanted to push, and they all said Candy Rain. That was the track that was eventually picked. Chalk personally did not like the song at all, but he was very expressive about it. But as Jace said, the fans have the upper hand, and they play the music.
Y'all know it was a hit when you recorded it?
Honestly, I could say no.
Yeah.
Andre promoted the song, and not only did it hit #1 on Billboard, but it also became a household song. If the boys had known, they would have stuck with Andre. But as they would admit on The Breakfast Club, they knew nothing about the business of the industry to make the right decision. They signed to Heavy D's record label, Uptown Records, in 1994. They trusted Heavy D a lot, maybe too much. He was so nice to them, and they even began to feel like they were friends and not business partners. That was a terrible mistake. Heavy took over from Andre after the first project, and he helped them produce the second. Unfortunately, while the project was being produced, something tragic happened. Scandal with Heavy D. To curb any eventuality of a quarrel, the boys had an arrangement. They were all lead singers. So in their next project, Chalk was to be the lead. Everything was fine and good until Heavy wanted Jace to do the remix. For some reason we might never know, Chalk was totally against the idea. Not only was he against it, but he was also very vocal about his disapproval, so he and Heavy D had a small spat. If the boys thought the bad blood would be washed off immediately and business would continue as usual, they were very wrong. Heavy completely pulled the plug on them, stating that they were difficult to work with. Heavy only helped them release their new song because it was their contractual agreement, but he did absolutely nothing to help them push it. No promotion, no shows, nothing. Their second project was a major flop. They barely made any lists, and they left fans disappointed. Heavy completely cut every communication from them too, and even ignored their many calls and texts. The difference between their first record and the second was quite clear. It was like the difference between day and night. The boys tried to contest it, but realized they were totally screwed. For one thing, their manager was Floyd, Heavy's brother, and their lawyer was also Heavy's lawyer. But that was not the worst thing to happen to them. Soul For Real was severely blackballed. They knew nothing about the business of music. They only knew how to write and make hits, so they tried to reach out to writers and producers, but they all ignored them. To add more flame to the already heated fire, they lost their publishing rights and completely stopped getting royalties, even when their songs were making money. To this day, they are still contesting this. The boys remained very popular but poor, which is quite a difficult situation to find yourself in, but the boys made another huge mistake. They kept these events to themselves. No one knew what had happened to the group. In fact, a lot of people thought they had allowed the skirmishes that came with fame to sideline and distract them from music. But they weren't lazy. In fact, they still tried to release track after track. More records. Even though the group was best known in the mid-1990s for their gold-certified hit song Candy Rain, they also had another hit, Every Little Thing I Do, and a minor R&B hit, If You Want It, from their platinum-selling debut album, Candy Rain. Every Little Thing I Do reached number 11 on the Hot R&B and Hip Hop Songs and number 17 on the Hot 100 chart. After touring and after the success of their debut album, they began working on their sophomore album, For Life, which was produced by Sean Combs and released on September 24, 1996. They were even nominated as the favorite soul R&B new artist for the American Music Awards in 1996. This particular album did well too, but definitely not as well as the rest. It peaked at number 29 on the Billboard R&B chart and number 119 on the Billboard 200. Their next single, Never Felt This Way, did way worse, but the album's second single, Love You So, did much better, peaking at number 64 on the Hot R&B Hip-Hop Songs in 1997. These desperate boys moved to an independent label, Chrome Dome Records, for their third album, Heat. However, after a distribution deal with Tommy Boy Music fell through, Warlock Records took over distribution and released the album on May 18, 1999. This album was a massive flop. It completely failed to chart and produced one single, Can't Wait. Their desperation to make even against all odds pushed them to form the label Aljoba Music Group, AMG, which didn't do as well as they had hoped. So in 2007, Soul for Real began to work on their fourth studio album, which they named The Unknown. The first single, One Man, featuring Jadakiss, was released later that year. Nope, it did not do well either. However, their struggling career did not only affect their pockets, but it also pushed them into doing things they naturally wouldn't. Crime. Tragedy struck in 2009 when Brian Dalrymple was indicted on 145 counts of aggravated identity and mortgage fraud. The news shocked the airwaves. Bree was part of the group everyone who grew in the 90s had listened to. To hear that he was charged as a criminal was very heartbreaking, and it killed whatever was left of their reputation. Brian himself admitted during their interview with Breakfast Club that he had been so desperate to stay rich and important after their fall from grace. His desperation moved him to roll with people who turned out to be very shifty. But that is Brian's version. The version on the internet is a lot more scathing. Social media pages and blogs reported that his desperation to save the fast life pushed him to hit the banks illegally. They also reported that all four brothers were involved in the scheme. About 65 people were alleged to have been duped by the R&B singer, and he was convicted for 5 years. But before his conviction, Bree made his situation worse off by trying to avert arrest. He grabbed his 10-month-old son and ran. Not only did he run, he remained hidden, even when the cops put out notices for his arrest. They searched everywhere for him for weeks, until he was later found in a friend's closet in North Carolina. The cops dragged him out, and he was charged almost immediately. This entire mishap was a terrible look for the group, and definitely made their hustle even more difficult. But that is the internet's version of things. Bree himself shone more light on the tragic event in 2020 and exposed details we would never have known. Bree explained that he got involved with some people, but he didn't know they were into shady dealings. He was not the person the cops were looking for, but he refused to release names, and so took the fall for them. He also expressed his dissatisfaction that black males still suffer those kinds of prejudice and stereotypes. So Bree, with 6 kids at the time, had to go to jail and be away from his children and his brothers for so long. While in jail, another tragic event occurred. The youngest of the boys found himself without anything to do and suddenly decided to go solo, but none of his music made any mark. In fact, even the Breakfast Club hosts were surprised when he mentioned he had several solo tracks. He would not be the first member to go solo, though. His eldest brother, Chalk, had tried to go solo years ago after their fall from grace, but he had not fared any better. In 2001, Chalk released a debut single, Crazy, which failed to achieve any level of success. Later, in 2001, he released yet another single, Make My Move, which had the same result as the debut single of the unreleased album, Chalk a Lot. This disappointment caused Chalk to play this music, and he began to focus on his personal life. In 2017, in an effort to make a comeback, Chalk released a new single entitled Want You to Know. Later in the year, Chalk For Real released American Girl as his second single. But while his brother was struggling to find his feet after Bree was thrown into jail, death crept in. But it was not Jace who, neither was it any of his brothers. It was someone for whom the boys claimed to be forever grateful, regardless, Heavy D. Heavy passed in 2011, and the boys were left distraught as they hadn't settled their grievances before it happened. To add more salt to the injury, they couldn't attend the burial and pay their last respects because they weren't invited to. Bree expressed that he holds no bitterness for their former label boss, even after everything he had put them through. But though he claimed to be speaking for all his brothers, some of his brothers might share a different opinion. Chalk was one of them. He vehemently said that Heavy got what he deserved based on what he did to them. If that wasn't understood, he later stressed that it was karma.
Passing was karma for what he did to y'all?
That's what I was getting to, basically. In
I
a
don't
nutshell.
say that,
Yeah, I was
in a
gonna say,
nutshell.
I wouldn't.
Unfortunately, he should never have said that. The internet was aghast by his words, and he and his brothers were labeled as bitter, ungrateful, and unforgiving. It got so bad that Chalk had to backtrack his words, claiming he had been misunderstood. But it was already too late. The damage was already done. Industry. The industry has always been merciless to this struggling group, and also very unforgiving. The boys have been battling one lie after the other ever since their come-up in the 990s. It hurt them more than the people they looked up to and expected to have their back, but they didn't. They even called the industry finicky.
The industry is finicky, so it's like
When they came up, the boys were too young to know how to navigate the complications of their new space. If they had been older or wiser, they would have known how to address any and every scandal they were involved with and cleared their name before it stuck. But they didn't, so they became casualties of the industry.
What happened to Soul For Real? Where have y'all been? What's been going on?
what happened
Basically.
to Soul For Real? I mean, honestly,
They also said that the most important lesson they have learned is to make sure they understand everything that is proposed to them before agreeing to it. Before they sign anything, they must make sure they understand, not just read it, whether they are working on a song, working with a producer, distribution company, etc. They were blackballed so badly that they met Andre in the club and the producer, who wanted to sign them, and when they walked up to say hi, he reacted weirdly, like he thought they were about to mug him. That incident really hurt them, and made them regret ever rolling with the people they rolled with. Fur, however. But their struggle in the industry did not, with the top at their blackballed bald or PBYD with multiple scandals. The music industry also changed on them. In the 90s, everyone wanted to listen to groups, especially boy bands with cute voices and faces. But in the 2000s, everything changed drastically. Solo acts became more popular, and R&B began to lose its flavor. The boys themselves said it best when they said that all groups suffered, and not only theirs. The era had changed completely. With this huge change, the boys struggled greatly, and are still struggling. In an interview with AHA, Jason also mentioned how much the industry had changed from the sound of the music. I wouldn't say so much about the visual, but people come in the business. People go out. Things change, so life evolves. It's only right. Brian agreed with him. I think that it's definitely changed. I think that was actually Soul For Real's cue. That was Aljoba Music's cue. For us to bring back something that the industry is basically avoiding right now. There's a huge void for the male R&B group, the real singers and performers. How many groups are out right now? But they did not just struggle against the AU. While they dropped new tracks, Jace also dropped his as a solo act. In 2012, while Chalk still served time, the boys announced that they were in the studio working on their 4th studio album, and even revealed the album title, The Evolution, Journey. That same year, the youngest member, Jace, went by the name of Jace, For Real, and finally came out as a solo artist. In 2016, Soul For Real released a new single, Love Again, and Jace released a solo single titled If You Feelin' Like Me, IYFLM, with a music video that he dropped on his YouTube channel. The following year, the group released the official video for Love Again and premiered it on their Vivo channel. In that same year, Jace For Real also released his third solo effort, If You Feel Like Me, the mixtape. None of these projects were doing well, but it did not stop them from trying. In 2019, they released 2 holiday songs, Silent Night and Christmas Time Is Here. And in 2020, they released their first single in 4 years, Love On Me. Shortly after, Jace also released a new single titled Do Better. Jace's albums are described as having a clever, hood-sexy sound with lyrics about love and life. His songs are a true display of mature urban music. In other music, Jace established his own independent production company, Jace Maker Music LLC, based in Atlanta, Georgia. In addition, he also started his own label, BEA Music Enta, where he planned to release his future projects and collaborate with other upcoming artists. Andre also raps and has dropped a few tracks. Because of this seeming competition, many people assumed the boys had fallen out, but they hadn't, and it didn't make it any better that they confessed to having a huge fight in Atlanta. They disagree often, as all siblings do, but their love and connection with each other is unshakable. People might imagine them feuding, but their bond has never been stronger.
Might think that we're not on the same page or we at odds with each other, but
Another death. In 2020, strategy struck them again. The boys lost their dear mother, and they suddenly found themselves grieving hard. Their grief was so strong that they released a single titled After the Rain as a tribute to their mother. She has even pictures on the single's cover art. In November 2021, they released a music video for this song. In December of that same year, After the Rain was released on all digital platforms. But their dabble with the media didn't dwindle at all. In fact, it seemed to have doubled, even though their shows are no longer selling and are now struggling to stay relevant. New efforts. In 2020, Chalk announced that they had a movie coming out titled Truth, the Story of Soul For Real. The movie was produced by Robinson and Chuck and was supposed to expose all the lies told against them. They even had a TV podcast in 2020. Brian also has a non-profit organization and a restaurant that strictly sold Caribbean food. It is such an innovative idea because, as he said, it is hard to find restaurants that specializes in Caribbean food, named Naomi's Island Cafe. Also employs convicted felons because they cannot get jobs after they have served time. They don't only serve food, they also do meal prep and catering services, but it couldn't salvage it. He currently lives in Las Vegas, NV. Also in 2020, they announced that their children, who are as talented as them, also dropped a song and they had helped produce their music video. February 2022, the struggling boy band announced on social media that they will appear on TV One's Unsung. The episode aired on March 6, 2022, and everyone really enjoyed their performance. In July of that same year, they were a guest on Nick Cannon's Wild 'N Out. The very next year, on June 10th, 2023, they were honored with the key to the city of Wyandanch, New York. They have also tried to work with notable artists and producers to push their music. Artists like Chris Brown, but that hasn't happened yet. What is more, they are doing everything they can to focus on their families and love them as much as they deserve to. They are staying away from trouble as much as they can for their children's sake. Bree now has 8 children and 5 baby mamas, and by how quiet his name has been on the internet, he has definitely been doing right by them. Breakup. But Chalk is focusing so much on his family, so much that he has now left the group. In an interview with All Hype Hop, Bree said that Chalk is putting his concentration and his efforts into raising his family. There being just 3 doesn't take the soul away from Soul For Real. He also expressed that his brother is welcome to come back anytime he wishes, and that he already knows this. We all have given him that open window to come back whenever he wants. Of course, he's the maestro. He's the one that started this. So it's only fair to have him be able to come back whenever he feels he's ready to. About his leaving, Andre said, "We were raised together. We have a strong knit family. We're all together. We all have a go-getter attitude. We all have sat down and talked in our meetings. And if Chalk is going to be raising his family, the best thing for us to do is just to move forward. It wasn't really thoughts or anything. It's just what we have to do. This is our career. We have to support our family. We're grown now." Jason also said, "It's definitely our thoughts and things have to change. So we have to work around him not being there. But like Dre said, we just have to move forward. It's not something that we can just put down like that. Their come up has been riddled with so many struggles and trauma, but it is so admirable to see how determined and dedicated they are to their craft. More than 20 years later, they are still here, dropping music and enjoying the media." Brian touched his fans when he said, "No, we're not worried, but it is a concern of mine. It's always up to the consumer. What we liked when we were 10, we don't like when we're 20. So it's hard for me to say, yes, our fans are going to accept us. Our fan base is going to accept us. We would hope that if you like good music, then you're going to like Soul for Real, because that's what we're giving. We're giving you hot music that's current with the times. Unfortunately, we were kids. I don't say it's unfortunate because a lot of people that did grow up with us, they're not kids anymore, and neither are we. They left a mark on the game, and they are going to be remembered. They gave us very nice and smooth jams in the 90s. They are always going to be remembered regardless." I'll end this video with a question asked by AHHA. Does it matter that you guys may have to reintroduce yourselves? Soul for Real, absolutely. I think everything is a challenge. Only certain things God gives us make it that way. With the help of the internet and the fact that the independent market is so prosperous and advanced, I think that's what's going to actually alleviate whatever headache or problem we might have ran across, because we have believed in the mass market and distribute our songs and our product, as opposed to when we were out. We didn't have the internet, which has played such a role in everybody's success right now. Soul for Real is just one of the many artists with hidden past and details. Like and subscribe while we uncover all of them.